In a forgotten cemetery nestled on the outskirts of a once thriving village, there stands a grave, concealed by time, but notorious for its chilling secret. Locals speak of it in hushed tones, warning outsiders to steer clear. For those who dare to approach, the story of the grave begins to unravel, revealing a tale of lost souls and a curse that refuses to let go. At first glance, the grave seems like any other. Its weathered stone, etched with symbols long obscured by time, is half buried beneath an overgrowth of ivy and moss. Yet, when the moonlight touches it just right, an eerie crimson hue emerges from the cracked surface, as though the stone itself bleeds. This disturbing sight first drew attention over a century ago when the body of a young woman, Lucinda Marlowe, was buried there. Lucinda, a woman whose beauty and grace once captivated the townspeople, was found dead under mysterious circumstances. Whispers about her death spread through the village like wildfire. Some claimed it was a tragic accident, others that she had been the victim of a brutal crime. What followed was even more unsettling. The grave began to weep. The first reports came from a poor widow, Esther Clark, who lived in a small cottage near the cemetery. Late one night, as she tended to her garden, she heard soft cries carried on the wind. Drawn by the haunting sound, she ventured toward the grave of Lucinda Marlowe. The moment she reached it, Esther witnessed a sight that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The stone of the grave was wet with what appeared to be blood, dripping steadily onto the ground. Esther ran back to the village, telling anyone who would listen. But the townspeople dismissed her claims, thinking she was simply an old woman with a fevered mind. However, as more sightings occurred, some reporting blood running from the grave like a river, others hearing whispers in the night, the eerie phenomenon became impossible to ignore. Soon, a priest, Father Alden, took it upon himself to investigate the claims. Upon his arrival at the cemetery, he immediately felt a chilling presence. The grave of Lucinda Marlowe was no longer just a marker of death. It was a source of immense suffering. Upon examining the site, Father Alden realized that the phenomenon was not mere superstition, but a manifestation of something far darker, curse. The legend surrounding Lucinda was one of sorrow and betrayal. Lucinda had fallen in love with a man named Thomas, a passionate and promising young artist. However, her family, who had arranged a marriage for her to a wealthy landowner, forbade the union. Distraught and heartbroken, Lucinda tried to flee with Thomas. But on the night they planned to escape, Thomas was found dead at the bottom of a cliff, his body broken and lifeless. Lucinda, crushed by grief and guilt, believed her love had caused his death. In the days that followed, her once beautiful visage became hollow, her eyes vacant, and she wandered the village like a ghost. The villagers, fearful and disapproving, blamed her for Thomas's death, calling her a witch, a harbinger of doom, unable to bear the weight of their accusations and her own sorrow. Lucinda took her life in the very cemetery where she would later be buried. What none of them knew was that her soul was bound to the grave, caught between the realms of the living and the dead. Her love for Thomas and her guilt over his death cursed her, causing the grave to bleed every night, a symbol of her sorrow and her spirit's inability to move on. As the years passed, Lucinda's story was buried beneath the weight of time, and the village grew, oblivious to the horrors beneath their feet. Yet, the curse persisted. The grave that wept red continued to bleed, as Lucinda's spirit cried out for forgiveness, for release from the shackles of guilt and sorrow that bound her to the earth. On rare occasions, the spirit of Lucinda would manifest her ghostly figure wandering the village, searching for Thomas, searching for redemption. In the dead of night, her faint silhouette could be seen by the village's lone street lamp, moving aimlessly, her pale hand reaching out as though calling to the living, begging for help. But who could help a spirit so lost, so full of sorrow? Who could undo the curse that had plagued her for so long? One evening, a curious traveler named Sam Uleman, who had heard the rumors and sought to uncover the truth, arrived at the cemetery. Samuel, a skeptic by nature, was determined to debunk the myth of the cursed grave. Armed with only a lantern and a journal, he ventured deep into the cemetery at midnight. As he stood before Lucinda's grave, the air grew colder, the winds howling through the trees. He placed his hand on the stone and immediately felt a strange vibration, like a pulse running through the earth beneath him. A voice echoed in his mind, soft, pleading, and filled with torment. "Set me free," it whispered. "Let me rest." Samuel, now fully aware of the depth of Lucinda's sorrow, felt a profound sense of compassion. Determined to help, he spent the following days researching her life and death. He learned of the tragedy she had suffered, the weight of her grief, and the injustice that had followed her even after death. Then, on a moonless night, Samuel returned to the cemetery with the intention of putting Lucinda's spirit to rest. He held a small offringa, white rose, the same flower Thomas had once given her. He placed the flower on her grave and recited an incantation he had found in an ancient manuscript, one meant to release spirits trapped in the realm of the living. For a moment, the air stilled. Then, as the first light of dawn touched the cemetery, the grave of Lucinda Marlowe stopped bleeding. The crimson hue faded, and the stone, once drenched in sorrow, became dry once more. From that day forward, the grave of Lucinda Marlowe ceased to weep. The village was forever changed by the events, and Samuel left with the knowledge that some stories, no matter how chilling, needed to be told in order to heal the wounds of the past. Lucinda's spirit, at last, found peace. But the grave remains a reminder of the forgotten souls who wander the earth, forever bound by their grief and their stories.